Read the original Bitcoin white paper in 2008. Started mining Bitcoin in 2010 on Java applets in Mozilla Firefox.
Wow, that's impressive, bro.
There was always the promise of, for me, what crypto could enable. The early ideas were always exciting about like micro payments, micro loans to people in different places. The fact that you removed the intermediaries were you giving a $20 loan to somebody in Africa. But for you to be able to do that in a developed country, it could have cost us $15 to make that transaction, have it go through. And I think that that was kind of the cool premise of crypto, and you could get a lot of stuff done in a trustless way.
Nylock, welcome to Jupe and Juice. Appreciate you for being here. For those who don't know you or aren't aware of what you do, can you give us a brief intro to yourself and a little bit about your journey into crypto?
Yeah. So read the original Bitcoin white paper in 2008. Started mining Bitcoin in 2010 on Java applets in Mozilla Firefox. Um, and then early Bitcoiner. Been in the industry professionally since 2014. So this year is my 12th year, and been involved in Solana since late 2021. Built Bitcoin prediction algorithms with machine learning back in 2017 using blockchain data. So there isn't much I haven't thrown at the wall. It's just that MetaDAO is the thing that has stuck. So that's the cool bit there.
Wow, that's impressive, bro. I mean, you've kicked this off. MetaDAO has stuck. Um, for me, I want to ask you, like obviously you've been here 12 years, you're saying, right? And in that time, you've done a lot. So I'm thinking a defining moment. Surely this can't continue, and this can't be the way forward. And one of them was, if you're into NFTs, you'll know about this, the Balloonsville rug. That was for me very very obvious that before the Balloonsville rug, it's like we were playing a minefield. Like people would either be buying into a project thinking I'm going to get rugged or I'm going to get money, and that was like a turning point. And the other thing was, and this kind of mixes into MetaDAO, was when Paulie sent out that tweet. I don't know if you remember this back in like 2023, early 24, where he just said, "This is the wallet address, send funds," and people sent, I think it was about $15 million. And I was like, this ain't how things should be. This is not safe, right? But is there defining moments for you that you can pinpoint where you was like, okay, this needs to be fixed, and actually you stepped in and started fixing it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, like we have those systems. It's called a lottery, right? Like, I mean, you can go out and
Yeah.
buy lotto tickets all you want, and there's rules around them. There's casinos that you can go in, and you understand that there's games there to be played. But I think for early days of crypto, for people that weren't there, right, a big conversation was like, this is certainly going to be illegal, right? There's no way the government lets any of this stuff work. And then I remember the FBI sold the the Pirate Bay, or sorry, not the Pirate Bay, the Silk Road
Yeah.
tokens back to like um, the common people, right? And then you go like, the government doesn't take drugs and sell them back to the community. I mean, like at a high level, at least as
Yeah.
publicly. So I think that that was a defining moment. 2017 was a defining moment with all the ICOs
Mm.
back then. 2014 with Ethereum was like defining moment for like
Mm.
programmable systems, and I, like going through all of it has certainly been the adventure. And coming through to NFTs, the metaverse. I mean, you had an entire Facebook pivot into like this vision that they had for this universe that we were all going to exist in, and like it was a strong thesis there, right? Like you didn't know what the internet was going to be, and then the internet became what it was, and it could have just easily been a real win of a gamble for them to go in, and it turns out we're all just connected through a port in the back of our neck, like the Matrix, right? So
Mm.
yeah, like I think that like those were defining moments, but then there was always the promise of, for me, what crypto could enable. And the early ideas were always exciting about like micro payments, micro loans to people in different places. The fact that you remove the intermediaries, where you giving a $20 loan to somebody in Africa, where like that means the difference between life and death for them, or like even building a scalable business. But for you to be able to do that in a developed country, like it could have cost us $15 to make that transaction, have it go through. And I think that that was kind of the cool premise of crypto, is that you could kill a lot of intermediaries and you could get a lot of stuff done in a trustless way. And that's what I think drove me into it as far as this technology goes. And then we've all experienced the NFTs. Investors got smarter over time, where they're like, actually, it turns out we do want to know who the founder is. Oh, it turns out we do care about whether there's a roadmap there. Oh, we do care if there's something more than just like an ephemeral idea or concept around a community. And so I think that that is the like power of crypto, is that you can go out and you can do all these things, but then on the backside is like, where are the protections? And we know what happens is, if there's not protections, then regulators come in and we end up building a structured system that not everybody can participate in.
Yeah. Do you think the because of the BTC stuff, right? You're there from day one, basically. So, do you think it achieved what it set out to achieve, or do you think it really diverted massively into more speculative, speculative areas? Let's say.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'll have many different takes on that depending on who you
Mm,
talk to. The early libertarian crowd was really excited about like, unstoppable money, and I think that that's still true, right? Like to this day, is that like you have this store of value. If you have a private key, you can take that across borders. You can take that across the globe. Nobody can stop you from doing that, and that's very different than carrying gold bars in your backpack. And I think that there's something like true about that. I think like when you reach massive adoption and people start to KYC and you start to have centralized exchanges, it starts to lose its luster for a lot of people that just like wanted this to be like its true ultimate form for things. But it is undebatable that Bitcoin has succeeded, right? Like it has memed itself into existence, and like it's only worth what anybody's willing to pay for it, and therefore it showcases what a finite supply and infinite demand can do to the value of something. Now, it's got some interesting properties, but I think it's accomplished what it set out to do. Whether it needs to expand beyond that is debatable, but like we have different layer ones. Bitcoin will always be what it is, and what it should be there.
okay. Which side of the fence did you lie on with inscriptions?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that it's cool. I think, like, obviously you want to use like whatever technology is there. And we've done a lot with, if you think of where the internet came from, with the protocols that we have today, we've done a lot. I mean, we're delivering video over HTTP right now to be able to do all this stuff. So it's pretty amazing what you can do with all of that. Um, so I think that there's like some merit to it, but then there's also like, if you're like creating problems for the underlying network just on the base premise of like what it does, it's just like trying to get a Fiat to run as a Lamborghini. I'm pretty sure you could fit it all in there, but it'd probably take
Mm,
a lot to make it all work the way that you need it to.
yeah. Okay. Um, all right. Let's talk about MetaDAO then, right? Um, how would you explain MetaDAO in simple terms, right? To someone who's hearing about it literally for the first time.
Yeah, I think that like at a high level,
Mm,
you could have this perspective on, it's hard to understand what token to go out and buy and what you're even buying. And there's a lot of things people can put on top of a token and give some guarantees and some promises, but you're completely dependent on the person that gave those promises to deliver on it. And what MetaDAO does is it creates in protocol, so like in the smart contracts, the way that we've created these things, some simple guarantees. And creates investor protections, really, like at a very base level. If you buy what we call an ownership coin, you have some guarantees at a base premise. You don't need to understand what those guarantees are, just like you and I don't need to know every regulation, associated with the EU or with the US. But when we go out and we participate in Robinhood, we have some guarantees that we're not getting involved in something that we shouldn't. And if we want to get involved in different places, you have disclosures, you have signing, like if you want to trade pink sheets, you have to sign a piece of paper. If you want to trade options, you have to sign a piece of paper that says, I understand what I'm getting into. And so what MetaDAO does is it tries to strike a balance between some investor protections and then like what you can do with crypto today. And I think that at its base premise is like what MetaDAO is for the uneducated or the uninitiated.
Okay. And you mentioned ownership coins. So, what's the difference between ownership coins and the coins that people are familiar with?
Yeah. And to be clear here, ownership is an implicit, not an explicit definition. An explicit
Mhm.
definition of ownership is just exactly what equities are, which means you have a percentage claim through participation of voting that delivers on a result. Ownership coins in MetaDAO's definition is it's a proposal away from becoming whatever you want it to, but until that proposal exists, it kind of exists in this blank state. So what's different? Um, Token voting is a pro rata, or like you get to a level of beneficial ownership where your representation is based on how much you own of those tokens or those shares. And in MetaDAO's case, you don't do that because every proposal, every decision that needs to be made or could be made surrounding the intellectual property or financials is dictated through this proposal mechanism where people trade rather than vote. And so what that means though is you have to put capital at risk or your investment at risk anytime you want to try to influence the outcome.
Mhm.
Unlike with token voting, where there is no cost outside of the initial acquisition of the tokens, here, day one, you could trade a proposal. Day two, another proposal comes out. You still have to trade it. So I think that that's kind of the key differentiator here. And for people that are used to participating, and I think crypto has a better participation rate than traditional shareholder voting in total, right? Because people want to come out and participate. Here with Futarchy with ownership coins, you actually, if the price is right, you could come in and say the price is right. I actually don't have to do anything. I've been taken care of by other traders that have expressed their view and their perspective, and it turns out I don't have anything else to say. And I think that that's pretty cool, but it's also pretty confusing for people that are used to token voting.
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to research it myself and get my head around it, and I've got some questions for you, obviously, because I'm starting to understand it. But you have explained it there, but we'll like delve into it a bit deeper, right? Like the comparisons between uh, normal token voting and obviously this is more based on the actual market deciding rather than the collective majority. So, okay, so let me go into there's there, when I was looking at how MetaDAO do things. Obviously, you hold the funds for like 7 days, and then you return any extra funds, all the funds if no one if they don't reach their goal. So there's also a clause in there where like you make it so the founders are like required to give away some control from day one. What's the thinking behind that?
Yeah. I mean, like, here's the thing. Crypto is like a new primitive. It's a way to interact with any intermediaries. We give up a lot of like trust, and therefore there's like a balance there. And what we've done in crypto is we've just like said, and this is always funny with crypto, right? As soon as there's an exploit, nobody
Yeah.
cares about self custody. They care about, hey, FBI, can you help me recover my funds, right?
Mm.
Nobody says actually it turns out because it's self custody you need to accept responsibility because of what happened. So like it turns out that we live in a world where we have a lot of protections and that we want those protections, but we're in a trustless environment. So how do we get those? And So there's got to be a balance here in crypto in some way, shape, or form. The fact that you can go out, like you said, send out an address, have 250 million show up in your wallet, that's cool. We shouldn't reduce frictions to be able to do that. But what we should be able to do is say, hey, if the founder is going to be able to do that, that's a huge win for the founder. What is the complementary balance to balance the scale, right? And so for us, right, tokens are great. We've existed in this regulatory gray area. We've existed in this legal gray area. And so what that's done is that's created a two-tier system here, which is like equity investors and then token holders. And as we've seen in the past year or so, that when companies go get acquired, ultimately the token holders have no stake or claim, and that is for good reason. Like just to like support the founders here, they have no fiduciary obligation to the token holders at all, zero, right? They have fiduciary responsibility to their equity holders, and if they try to do anything with the token, I could sue them as an equity holder and say you are not being responsible to me, who you have a liability to. And so like it's not a surprise to me that that happens. And I like, to be fair to founders, it's not a surprise to them that it should happen. It's a surprise to token holders because they're like, wait, I thought we like agreed on something here, right? Because like you got money for us. The reason that this got built in some way, shape, or form has something to do with this. So obviously there's some value here, but they're under no obligation to do it. And I think what we've done here is said, listen, token holders need a say. And while we can't exist into like securitizing or tokenizing equity, what we can do is we can go under contract law here and say, listen, if you want to do something with the intellectual property, token holders have a right to participate in that decision. And that is what Futurky is at its base case. So this is the counterbalance of it. Yes, founders give up some control, but ultimately it's a balance to say, in the event of a sale or acquisition, something materially impacting the intellectual property, the token supply, or the treasury, we should have some say in that. And then that's at least the level playing ground that we create. It doesn't mean that every proposal is always going to work out in the right way, but that's what we're trying to do, is just even the playing field there.
Yeah. Okay. And in my research, I kept seeing a term coming up, which was vote on values and bet on beliefs. So what does that mean, in practice?
Yeah. So, Robin Hanson's original paper, for those that don't know, the thing that Futurky is based off of, even the term Futurky came from an economist, Robin Hanson, who also invented the AMM, for people that don't know. And he also, created the great filter theory, which is, anybody that studies the universe, cosmos, and everything else may be familiar with that. So he's a deep thinker. He's a very interesting cat. And so what he said is like, it'd be cool. The ultimate form of organization is like society and governments. And so it'd be cool in this experiment to be able to like run a government using market-based decision making, because it eliminates all the politics and the social pressures and everything else. And so what he postulated there was, hey, like as a community, as a society, we value something. So let's all, like come out, show up to vote and say, what do we value as a society? And then what we do is we bet on whether that, like what's being produced as a decision is going to impact that thing that we've all collectively decided was going to be important. What's cool is, with MetaDAO, what we've done is we've circumvented the voting part and said, with businesses, actually shareholder value, which is like represented in the price of the asset. So you don't actually have to, as shareholders, you don't have to go out and say, like what is the key metric that Walmart should be targeting? It's like, no, the share price is the target, right? For anybody that's going to go out and buy shares of Walmart. So we don't have to vote from a business perspective on like what the key metrics is. We just have to say, is this going to deliver shareholder value? And the best way to do that is to use the price of the asset there. So we use the price of the token in lieu of any voting. Now, if you go to the government scale, I can't trade the US dollar relative to the US dollar, right? We have to trade some other metric, and that could be longevity, that could be happiness score, that could be everything else. So that's where that kind of evolves into. And you could also see it in other organizations. The CIA runs prediction markets. The Google has run internal prediction markets. HP has run prediction markets. So they're saying like, what time will this project be delivered by? So like you can do the vote on values, but a lot of this stuff can be circumvented and say, actually, this is a KPI that we all know is important. We don't need any debate here, and token price just happens to be that for us.
Right, like let's talk about like the DAO structure, right? So like within crypto, I'm very familiar with the traditional DAOs. Like you said earlier, you buy your token is your weight on the process. The more you have, the more weight you have, and the less you have, the less weight you have. This is so different because it's like it's more about your betting. I've lost my train of thought.
No, you're good. You're good. You're onto it right. What you're
Yeah,
trying to do is like what a market is price, like information that's distilled down into a price, right?
yeah.
And so like when somebody's pricing Ford Motor Company, for example, there are people that are consuming satellite data for Ford manufacturing plants that say how many trucks are parked out there day one, how many are parked out there day two, how many are like, let me look at the shipping, manifest of trains across the United States to get a sense of like what Ford should be priced at. But it all distills down into like one unit,
Mm.
one thing there, right? And that's what like Futarchy's doing in lieu of like what is your percentage representation of vote, because really if you look at like how capital markets and capitalism is formed, it's about capital allocators, right? Elon Musk is as worth as much as he is today, not because he memed it into existence, not because he doesn't have like some power about him, right? Like it's because he's built and delivered a lot of products for people that impact a lot of people's lives, right? And so same thing happens here. If Elon, just was like some regular Joe Schmo and he had like a huge proportion of something, he could be just a guy that owns a lot of stuff and has no practical insight on the decision that needs to be made here. What's cool about like Futarchy and the way that this stuff works is you do not have to be a token holder to come participate in one of our like decision markets. And that I think is the ultimate power, because you are not just speaking to your community or the people that currently hold tokens. You're speaking to anybody that has any information that can be distilled down to a singular point. And that is the power of this stuff, that like you and I could not be like, I could give two shits about some company that's trying to make a decision. I just happen to know about a lot about buying zoos, and they're talking about buying a zoo, right? And I can bring that information in. If I have the opportunity to say, this is completely mispriced, this is completely done, I can make 60 grand. And you've seen that with Polymarket stuff now, right? It's like, I have some information, I can make some money, I'm going to reveal that information. People are like, these are incredibly accurate. Why are they incredibly accurate? And it's like, because somebody has the money, has the ability to aggregate the information and return a profit, and therefore they're incentivized to continue to participate in this stuff.
Do you think that's what's the important factor here? That there's the cost, like you're having to put that money where your mouth is, right? Literally, like
Yes.
putting your money where your mouth is, rather than your investment is already there. So therefore, you're participating just because you already have an investment and
Yep.
participating. Is that the massive distinction? Would you say?
Yeah, I think so, because like if you're required to put your money where your mouth is, you really consider what your mouth is saying. Or, like you can still put your mouth out there, but there's no money that represents your mouth, right? Like so I think that is a key differentiator here. That like there is risk associated with it versus like you said, hey, I happen to have this. Whether I have 2 cents to add to it, I'm still going to add 2 cents to it. Not to mention the fact that because it's costless, I'll follow the crowd. What is the majority already going to say? Versus like, hey, the majority is saying this. And I'll use this concrete example. When the presidential election favored Trump on Polymarket significantly, it was like 70%. And the polls were saying 50%. I got like 8 phone calls, right before the election that said Polymarket's got to be wrong, right? Because like the pollsters, and I'm like, there is a $21 million opportunity for you to take right now, if you are certain, right? Like if you are really certain here, and I think that is the key differentiation there is that like everybody wants to see a market. Very few people will participate in the market, but when the market tells them something that they don't like, they have a counterfactual. But the fact that like you and I could go out and home mortgage our loan because it is 100% guarantee because they're wrong, I'm right.
Mm,
Well, that means there's a mortgage on your home, right? So like you better
yeah.
be willing to bet that. And I think that
Mm.
that's where this has the power, the drawing power there to actually get a result that's desirable rather than just follow the crowd.
Yeah, and yes, it's super interesting. Now, for me, like coming from Jupiter DAO, I've seen the DAO become from something very small to something very big. Everyone, very eager to participate, and get those juicy rewards as well with the ASR structure. But ultimately, it felt like it became a place where, because everyone did have that investment, and there was really, the risk was that the token price would go down, not necessarily like that this proposal's outcome would make the token price go down or up or whatever. So it's like there was too many chefs in the kitchen, and at one point we were all just arguing with each other about everything, and it
Yep.
just didn't work, unfortunately, right? And then the DAO got paused, and for me, I'm like, what if the model was different and we wasn't being rewarded? Actually, we were somewhat being penalized for making the wrong decisions. Because no matter what we said, if we said on this proposal or no on this proposal, we got our ASR rewards, right?
Yep.
And we didn't see a good outcome from that. So my question is to you is like, do you think even the Jupiter DAO could change its model to futurarchy and find more success? Or what's your opinion on that? Like on a
Yeah,
personal level?
I don't think that this is like a one size fits all for everybody,
Yeah.
right? Like, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I think Jupiter DAO, like without any argument, was like
Mm.
one of the most successful DAOs as far as participation and like influence out there, right? Like, I mean, it's just not deniable there.
Yeah.
And so the question goes is like, did we get out of it what you would hope, or like was it efficient and effective? And I, like this is all a grand experiment in the crypto space, so like no harm no foul across any of that stuff. I do think that like you're right to start to question the methods, the mechanics. I mean, obviously the team has questioned all of that stuff because
Mm.
this is the result. And you get into this environment like you said where there's too many cooks in the kitchen, where you go, yeah, I get that a developer salary of $10,000 a month is absurd to somebody that has access to like Eastern European talent that is like leaps and bounds beyond, that is like 10 times less cost. But like that is not the environment that the operators of this business are in. Or like you are not weighing all the consequences and the like feedback that comes externally, from making these decisions or having to run a team or coordinate all these people. And I think that there's like a huge discrepancy between the armchair business operators and then like actually building a business and like being um, ready and willing to take feedback there. And I think Jupe's done a lot of that. Like they've
Yeah.
done a lot of feedback, they've seen a lot of stuff here, and I think that they are like cautiously exploring what needs to be done there. And I think that we as a community, we as a like environment, as an industry, need to run these like experiments to understand like where they start to break down or where it's ineffective for us to be able to run our business. And Jupe could say like, listen, we're not going to leave every decision to the DAO, or like we're going to elect temporarily. MetaDAO famously had a proposal that was like, we are going to be benevolent dictators for 3 months, kind of
Mm.
thing. And I think that like those things are like perfectly viable, like avenues on which to do this. I think it does come down to that question of like, hey, if there's too many cooks in the kitchen, how do you solve for that? Hey, how do we get rewarded for making the right decisions, and how do we get penalized for making the wrong ones? And those are really great first principle problems to start to like explore and understand, and then come back to the drawing board and say like, listen, Jupe DAO's grand experiment. Like we had the highest activity of any DAO on Solana, probably the highest activity of any DAO ever, as far as
Mm.
feedback and being able to process all this information. how do we change it? How do we fix it? How do we go through? Is Futarchy one of those options? Potentially, absolutely. The question comes down to, what are the decisions that you want to make? What are some important things for you as a founder that you want to align with? And I think that Futarchy, in its original form as we created it, and it's evolved drastically since, was kind of in the favor of the investors in an extreme way. And now we've started to come to terms and understand, to run your business in a practical sense, turns out maybe the founders should have far more discretion on what they need to do to be able to succeed, because they're the ones building it. And if you demotivate the founder, right? If Meow wants to do something and he sees it as a long-term vision, and he's here for 10 years through hell or high water, he's here for 10 years and he's got that guarantee, maybe you need to trust the dude that wants to be here for 10 years over the guy that's going to be here for 2. So, I think that there's a lot of like wiggle room there. And, I think that being a DAO, giving people a voice is like step one. And I think that there's something very powerful in that. You get a lot of good feedback.
Yeah, I mean, even though things are paused, I feel obviously we're on our road to Kuala Lumpur, and I don't know what the news is going to be. I don't know, maybe the DAO's going to start again. Maybe we're going to be explaining some new mechanics and stuff. But I'm excited for it, and I really miss it as well, because I feel like it did have a central point around the holders' like life as well. Like, you know what I mean? It's like our community was there, our decision making. And then once it got paused, it's like a big chunk of what we centered things around was just paused. So I'm excited for it to see how it gets revived and reset and we go again. Okay.
Yeah, and I think the important thing, like one thing I really like about like our design and our system is that you get to churn through people that participate in your like discussion in the environment, right? Like if you're done, you say, hey, if this is the direction that this is going, I'm done. I think that Futarchy gives you this like out. And then now all you have on the cap table are people that believe and buy into that vision, versus like in a traditional DAO environment, what you need to do is get people to forcibly sell their allocation and be like, I'm done with this. And I don't think that that is like a really good user experience from like the DAO's perspective and from the user's perspective. But like with Futarchy, you could disagree with the decision and get bought out. And I think that there's something incredibly cool about that, where you're like, okay, turns out now all the people that are aligned with Jupiter are aligned in this direction. Yes, it was confrontational. Yes, we purged a lot of people. That's okay. That's part of like the way that economics works. And you can now join this country, this thing that we built, in this vision and this ship, the direction that it's going. And you have that naturally in markets, right? Like your decision right now, if you want to continue to participate with Jupe, is like, I can keep my Jupe, or I can be done with it. And now I'm going to move on to something and dedicate my time and resources to. And, I just think it's a more elegant system, because the people that do believe have to buy out the non-believers. And in this case, right, like if you just sell, you reduce the token price, and then you create more non-believers through that price action alone. And it's just this very challenging environment to be in. And I sympathize with every founder that has to build in crypto, because it's an insane space. Can you imagine Mark Zuckerberg having a Telegram channel or a Telegram handle that's like to every Facebook user? And he's like, let me build Facebook while I get all this feedback on how I'm doing it wrong. Like you've got to be crazy to be a crypto founder in the first place, but a crypto founder even more so.
Yeah, I've pondered that in the past. When when you say it, it makes me laugh. But I have pondered that in the past. I'm like, how would anyone get anything done? Like, how would they ever be successful? Because everyone's on your back constantly. That pressure is like 10x, 20x compounded. But yeah, like some people.
And then you have people that come out and they're like, well, you just use Futarchy, and it's like, well, it may not be that simple. Like, I want to support people that want to like run that experiment. But like, I sympathize with it, right? There's a lot of complexity that goes into it. There's a lot of decisions that need to be made. And it's not as simple as have somebody call you out on Twitter and have a lot of people like bandwagon that. And then you're like, all right, well, let me look into it. And it's like, all right, well, like, is this going to be the next 6 months of our lives to like materially make impact? And I think that that's like incredibly hard. And I have tremendous sympathy for everybody that like works in this space. And that's why you don't really see me like critique anybody, right? Like, because it's like it's easy to critique Jupe from the cheap seats and say like, you guys could have done so much better. And it's like, well, we didn't have this post information that everybody's using, because if I had had it, maybe I would have done it differently.
Mm. Yeah. That kind of segues me into yourself as a co-founder with Profit. So there's a thing that I came across the other day where it's a statistic that startups with co-founders are more likely to succeed by about 30%, but actually the reason why the startups with co-founders fail, which is up to 65%. Startups. Yes, startups that fail with co-founders are up to 65% because of the contention that co-founders have, right? So it's like that's an interesting statistic because it's so paradoxical.
Yep.
So how do you your relationship with your co-founder, how do you guys make it work?
Yeah. I think that that's like incredibly challenging, and it's certainly like difficult to navigate, right? Because like, in many cases in the startup space, right, like you are effectively building a marriage between two people that may know very little about each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably where that statistic swings, because you can imagine how many first dates end in marriage, and there's probably a high statistic that it doesn't. But like it takes a date to get to marriage, right? Like these things happen. So like to have a co-founder is incredibly important for like, being in the startup land, because there are days that you are not motivated or days that you are dissuaded, where your co-founder picks up a lot of slack and continues to motivate you in different ways. So I think that, like, that is certainly a net benefit there. And then I think like proactively you are looking for, just like dating, you're probably looking for value alignment, incentive alignment across both of you. So are you both principled in the same way? Do you hold the same value set? Are you motivated in the same way? Those are important factors that like help make it worthwhile. And then I think the other thing that people need to realize is that this is a business, and either the business is going to succeed or it's going to fail. And like you understand that like these things aren't personal. It's about a striving for success there. And as long as you create that bubble, doesn't mean somebody can't be an asshole. Doesn't mean that you should be an asshole, right? But it does mean that like, hey, what this person's coming from, the point that they're coming from is trying to build something like very valuable here. And I think that if you're able to adapt and understand that, you can work with a lot of different personalities. Empathy goes a long way, just like thick skin goes a long way there. And you're just looking for how to support each other where your, inefficiencies are, and make sure that those are complementary. But yeah, like, I think it's a balance. I think it's a dance, and I think it's like it can be beautiful, and you just have to understand where your red lines are, and you got to work together through everything there.
Nice. And obviously, you guys are doing a good job. Like all your raises are on average, I think 3x. Obviously, Ranger was like like 10x plus or something what they required, and you're obviously doing something right. So when something doesn't go to plan, though, right? When something doesn't go to plan, how do you guys look at rebuilding trust and gaining trust from the market? Because obviously it's very dependent on the market what you guys do. So if you lose trust in the market, I suppose you lose everything.
Yeah, I think the cool thing for us is we get a lot of chances. You don't get a lot of chances to lose people's money because of smart contract risk. You don't get a lot of chances in that realm. So we take those chances very seriously. Outside of it, I think like we always err on like the side of being overly aggressive in like favor of protections rather than not. So if you look at our initial proposal period was 10 days, right? Like you would trade a proposal for 10 days. We went down to 5 days, then we kind of settled on 3. Our pass threshold used to be 5%. We went down to 1%. Then now we're back up to 3%. And then we gave the team the ability to sponsor proposals and make that a -% for a pass threshold. So in the event that the market is undecided, defer to the person that wants to execute it, right? In that case. And so I think a lot of this is like learnings for us because we get the feedback from founders. So I will say that like Mountain Capital, which was the first token raise that we did not succeed. And it probably did not succeed mostly because of the way that the protocol worked. And so we went back to the drawing board and we created spending limits for teams. We wrapped everything with squads as the base execution layer. So now that you can do complex instructions. We had feedback from founders, even from the recent raises, that were like, hey, I need to get an audit through. I have a $50,000 a month spend. I got to make payroll, but it shouldn't be like outside the realm that I need to go raise a proposal, ask for permission to spend 3 times what my spending limit is. So, like building that into the protocols so that founders have an easier way to go about this stuff. And then founders say, listen, if the market's 50-50 on this, let me get the upside on, or let it defer to me in that case. And so I think that like, because we were so cautious on that, you didn't get into the environment where the founder ran away with all the money and now we got to go talk to investors. If anything, we're saying, hey, investors, what are you willing to sacrifice to make it so high quality founders are willing to like meet us in the middle here? So I think we've given ourselves quite a bit of buffer, and then that's what's let us adapt and evolve this to a point where I think we're finally getting to that happy medium.
Nice. And obviously broader market conditions is what it is. Like, we'll see ups, we'll see downs. That's just how it goes. You've been around a long time, so you know it better than even I do. But what keeps you building when these moments come, when these bottoms come, when it's very bearish? What keeps you going?
I think it's like, like core ethos or principles, right? Like ultimately, but I do, especially not this past year as much, but the years FTX collapse and other things, right? Like Sam Bankman-Fried was not just FTX CEO. He was the golden child of Congress, right? Like he was going out in their meeting. And like for somebody that's been operating in the industry for a long time, you're like, finally, we're getting somebody to meet the regulators and like we're getting serious. And then to have that like pulled out from underneath you because this was an illegitimate fraudster, right? Like is certainly demoralizing. So I think I had the come to Jesus moment, like every year for the better part of 10 years that was like, this is my industry. These are my peers. And is this what I stand for? Because this is what people are comparing, like this is just like, hey, I work in crypto. Oh, do you know these, these people, these are your peers. So I think that like, it's right to have that reflection because that that showcases that there's something that you don't agree with in the way that it is. And then, for me, it's like, hey, we should be trying or striving for something different or better. And, like, am I on that path? And if you're on that path, I think it makes it easy. Even if it's underappreciated, I think you can keep your head held up high. And that I think is incredibly important for what keeps you moving in those days. But like, yeah, I mean, like, I think everybody's had that through crypto. And then it's just, tomorrow's another day. And tomorrow's a day to change whatever you thought was wrong, either in your own decision making, right? I'm not gonna send 250 million to an address, right? Because like that just incentivizes poor behavior. Or like, hey, the next thing I'm going to build is going to make sure that this is taken care of. And I think that those are the two things that I think about the most.
And how do you handle responsibility? Because you're in a position of massive responsibility. Like even me, being voted in to do Jupe and Juice, do these podcasts, make media for the DAO and everything. It felt like a massive responsibility, and I always want to step up to the mark, right? But I feel like the responsibility you have is, it's with people's money. Mine's with people's trust. I feel when that yours is trust and compounded with their money, their actual funds, right? How do you how does that weight sit, and how do you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm incredibly empathetic and like very aware of the situation that we're in. So I think, you take common best practices on like what you're doing and how you approach things. First and foremost, right? Like it's like, hey, I take this very seriously. The way that you're going to interact with me is going to be very serious. We'll make sure that this is taken care of. And I think that people can come to expect that from me. And even if it's gonna take longer, you're gonna understand that this is gonna be done in the right way. Um, I think people make mistakes. I think it's important to learn from those mistakes and to continue to evolve. But I mean, there are high intensity environments and very like costly environments for mistakes that like humans operate in regularly. You can imagine your pilot. Your pilot has many rules that makes it so that he can fly the airplane 13 hours to get to from London to the United States. If they make a mistake, that's extremely costly, and we don't make many mistakes in that industry, even though it's like when mistakes are made, it's very well publicized. But
Mm-hmm.
so like I think you can do the same systems there. Humans are incredibly capable of like handling extreme responsibility and accountability there. You just have to adapt. How do these systems work to make it so that these people, normal people, can have that as their day job? You can imagine a physician, a heart surgeon, a neurosurgeon. These are people, sure, they're like specific people. They've trained for this, but like we put trust in those people too. So I think that there's like a bit of procedure systems that you build around it, and then it's like having disclosures, having people understand like where these things may or may not break. I'm not Elon Musk. I'm not going to get on stage and say we're going to Mars in 2 years and have all the engineers cringe and be like, there's no way we're getting there in 2 years. um, but like for high intensity situations, I don't think Prophet or I say that like this is a perfect system, this solves all your problems. I think we meet people in the middle ground, and then yeah, like I think you deal with it in different ways. But I think if you're authentic at the very base case of it, and you've built around it and you've really thought about these things deeply, I just don't think you can move forward hastily with any of it. And that, I think, is always going to be that like counterbalance of, you want to move extremely fast because people need things, and then you still want to be extremely careful because if there's things we know we need to change, changing it for 6 people is different than changing it for 400 people. And that, I think, is something we put into deep consideration.
Okay. Um, this last question is a bit of a fun one, um, bit of a strange one as well. Like, if you could put something globally, right, to a futurarchy vote where we could collectively change one thing in the world, right? What would that be for you? What would you do?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, you've got the status quo of like, how do you eliminate all war or poverty and like fear or anything like that.
Yeah.
um like I really do like the fact that there's like cost associated with decision making,
Mm-hmm.
and it would be very interesting to me, for the things that you can't go back on, right? So, or are very hard to go back on, and Robin's talked about this a bit, but like going to war, for example, has an extreme cost, and like the decision to not go to war, like has its things. So I think that that could be really cool in an environment that like, hey, if you want this to really happen, you get to see the incentivized parties, you get to see who's trading these markets, who's incentivized to do it. Because like there are all these costs, and there are all these prices that people put on things behind closed doors, right? There is a, you know uh Fight Club had the famous line where he's like, if the cost to do a recall is less than for us to pay out the insurance claim on the like problems that are caused, we don't do the recall. And so somebody somewhere, an actuary somewhere, is saying a human's life is worth $38,000 in North America and it's worth $4.50 elsewhere. And so I think that like having that surfaced really probably puts a lot of things in perspective for a lot of people. So I think that if like every war or every decision to be aggressive was like put to a market vote, I think, you know, the people that could be drafted would be trading those markets, right? Because obviously there's an associated cost with that. The military industrial base would be trading that. The people that like would have war brought to them would be trading that. And I think that you know, like it's uncanny, but I think the practicality of it could be really eye opening for a lot of people to have like this philosophy surface that's like, what the fuck are we doing here? Like, who are we? We are all just humans on this rock hurtling through space. Everything outside of the earth wants to kill us. Why are we not all here operating as one humanity? And what the hell's wrong with us?
Yeah, I mean, it would be very, very exposing. You know what I mean? Like it
Yeah.
would be very exposing. And I like the concept. I like the idea. It's a good choice.
Yeah, I don't like what it infers, which is like,
Yeah,
you know, killing people as a cost, you know, like it's
yeah,
worthwhile or whatever. But, you
yeah.
know, like I think that anything you can to surface the human experience across like each of us as individuals and be like, turns out you and I are just humans, just like every other human that's out there. We all are afraid of the same things. We're all want the same things, you know. I think anything to be able to bring humanity together is like a good a good thing and a good tool, even if it's never used again, right? You can imagine that is the singular event, and then there's no more wars because it's like this was so fucked up for all of us that we're just never going to do this again.
Yeah. Um, and that's me really. I've gone through my questions, but I'd like to say to you, is there anything you would like to say before we wrap up? Anything you'd like to share? Is there anything that I've not covered that you feel should be covered?
No, I'm excited to, you know, like talk to more people, get the vision and, you know, mission out there. You know, like I'm not professing to have all the solutions, but I think people asking questions and people exploring is the way that we like build better things here. And I'm really encouraged by that. I'm really interested to see the MetaDAO community grow and to like get people thinking and the feedback in there. I read all of the stuff, despite what anybody, you know, says you don't read this or you don't see this stuff. I'm in there, you know, pretty consistently, and it's always cool to see people exploring those ideas because it may not. I know that we certainly don't have the end state of all of this, but it's cool that we're like exploring and saying, hey, could we demand something a little bit different? Could we structure something a little bit different? Because we're excited about it. Like this, you know, I'm still engaged. I still want Jupe to succeed. And that's cool. The fact that you have people there willing to like have those conversations. And I just want to continue to encourage that and welcome people into the MetaDAO community to talk about it. If anybody has any questions, wants to explore more about ownership coins, Futarchy, the Launchpad, founders in the crypto space, I'm a huge resource for you. Excited to talk to you about anything and everything under the sun.
Okay, so well, thank you very much. Appreciate you for coming out and sharing with us and spending time and letting us know you better. Thank you, and yeah, peace out.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks.